But that's also because I don't approach myself as being, I don't approach my identity, myself as being made up of multiple identities. I am one whole person. So, following the other video yesterday and thinking of the video last week, I thought this would be an interesting article because there's some things in here that I thought would be interesting. Of course, like everything else, there's the so-called thing about misinformation, right? You got to get rid of misinformation. And of course, the immediate question I have is, who gets to define what is misinformation? Just because that kind of moniker can be misused and abused horribly, as it were. So that's why we ask this question, what do you mean by misinformation, and who is it that gets to make use of it, and what have you? Well, not make use of it, who gets to define it? But I thought this would be interesting. So this comes, this is time of year for a lot of scientific fields to have their big meetings, because, it's not around, well, this is actually late. It's over Christmas and New Year's, and early in January is there's some major meetings then, like the American Meteorological Society and the American Geophysical Union, and the whole thing where the professional societies all get together. This is one of the bigger ones because this is just science in general. So the more general you get, the bigger the meeting and the organization can be, because you're representing more people in that professional society. So this is Empower with Evidence, written in Science Magazine. This week, February 17th to February 20th, the virtual annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, the publisher of Science. So that professional society does publish the magazine. You could say the same for the American Geophysical Union. You could say something similar for the American Meteorological Society. They have their own kind of things that they do end up publishing. AMS tends to stick to more peer-reviewed stuff than others do. Science does commentary like this. Will address the challenges of building the public's trust and understanding of science by illuminating both great science and innovation initiatives in advocacy, education, and policy. The theme, Empower with Evidence, speaks to the critical importance of decision-making, policy-making, and interventions that are grounded in knowledge and facts, not opinions, or worse, misinformation. So you can kind of already see where the author is going with this, in that, you don't want to ground everything in opinion. And misinformation, well, it may be your opinion about what to do based upon evidence. So you're not entirely getting away from actually using an opinion in a decision-making process. You're providing your opinion on what to do based upon evidence. And that's two different things. Misinformation, like I said, who gets to define what is misinformation? And that goes back to the evidence kind of thing. Because, one of the things that we have, even though we don't, it's in a way subconscious, is the idea of the correspondence theory of reality, which is to say things are real based upon, can you observe it? Do your physics match up with what you observe in reality? Those kinds of things. Does it, what you think, correspond to reality kind of issue? It's the correspondence theory of reality, and I am not phrasing it exactly right. I know that. Here, so you might call me on that one and go check it out on that one, and maybe I'll do a video on that just for kicks and giggles. But who defines what is misinformation is a very fair question to ask. The ability of science to transform the world is increasingly threatened by misinformation that is jeopardizing trust in science. Okay. Misinformation that is jeopardizing trust in science. I've got a problem with this, if only because that is certainly not the only thing that is jeopardizing trust in science. I have done videos after video after video on this channel. One of them was the panel chat, where the panelists mentioned that one of the reasons they don't trust scientists right now, or experts writ large, is the sort of condescending arrogance of knowing better than others do, and not allowing people to make their own decisions, or not wanting people to make their own decisions, or being condescended to when they make their own decisions differently, or have a different opinion that might be very well based on the same evidence that is out there. And that's why I think there's a problem with this, and that you can have the same evidence that shows up in data and have two different scientists completely disagree on the reason for that observation in the evidence. So that's why I'm kind of like, This doesn't seem quite so right as you would think. As highlighted in Science last week, the world's information ecosystem is rapidly changing, and online environments have become a powerful open marketplace of facts, ideas, and opinions, where the meaningfulness of science is easily drowned out by the noise. What is the meaningfulness of science here? For me, I'm not going to assume what the author presumes is the meaningfulness of science, but the meaningfulness of science to me goes back to what is the purpose of science, the telos of science, if you will. And telos of science is the pursuit of the truth. As a process, it is the pursuit of the truth. So this is certainly interesting. And yeah, it does get drowned out by the noise. But I'm looking for it because there was another article I read and I lost it. I meant to go find it. That was arguing that Biden needs scientists with serious policy chops. Which goes to a whole argument that goes back and forth in among scientists of how much should scientists be involved in the development of policy. Because that obviously pushes toward the problem of, do you get struck with the disinterestedness problem or things like that involved. So that's one thing, certainly, that is interesting. So, and yeah, I do agree. You know, sometimes you get a lot of things drowned out by noise, particularly on social media, and that's part of the problem. But social media also, I think, does a great job of reinforcing groupthink. In a lot of ways, it's very easy to block a persona rather than to block and demean a persona rather than engage with that as a person when it's a person behind the keyboard. You know, a person behind the screen who's saying such things to you or whom you're saying things to yourself. Solutions to this dilemma include training students and professional scientists to more effectively translate their work to the public, harnessing insights from the behavioral and social sciences to better engage with the public, and working with social media platforms to improve information delivery to a broader audience. These are important efforts, but do they get to the roots of the problem? So wait a second, why is it a scientist's job to improve information delivery with social media platforms? It's a very fair question. This is not asked, actually, by the author, and that's going to get me annoyed because it's not asked by the author. Here, why is it a scientist's job to improve the information delivery to the broader audience? Should it be the scientist's job to be the ones pointing to say this is misinformation and this is not misinformation? I am thinking of things like fact-checking groups like Climate Feedback, who at the moment I think is being sued by John Stossel, if I remember correctly. It's Facebook. Facebook is being sued by John Stossel because they use climate feedback. John Stossel has a couple of different videos on that. I'm not going to weigh in on that argument either way, but that is an example of what the author here might be talking. That might be considered an example of what the author is talking about. Those are scientists who spend part of their time when they are asked to weigh in on a piece that has received a lot of prominent attention. Is it something that is scientifically accurate? And it's with respect to climate and climate change is climate feedback, but there are others that Facebook uses here, and then Twitter probably uses, and that others use. But that's a question I've been wanting to get an answer to. That's a more philosophical question. Is it really the job of scientists to be working on information delivery with social media platforms to make an improvement? Scientists are the pursuit of the truth. The communication of it is a whole different matter. And yeah, it should matter to scientists, that their work may not be getting communicated accurately, and it should matter in a lot of ways because, this is a whole topic in and of itself, is how does journalism butcher the delivery of scientific information. So that would be interesting in and of itself, right? But, I go back and forth on that question, and that, I'm obviously a scientist out here working on information delivery, talking about some of these topics with all of you all, and I'm using major social media platforms and YouTube and locals to do that. But, how much should I, in my professional capacity, be involved in doing that? I wonder about that. And, do you offer the temptation to scientists to, I don't know, to say that competing scientists who have a different view of the evidence should be shut down because they're not improving information delivery, or they're not delivering correct information, or you can accuse them of delivering misinformation when maybe that's not what they did. So it raises a lot of interesting questions. So translating work to the public, yeah, I can definitely agree with that. There's benefits to having students and scientists be able to translate their work to the public. But I also go back on that to say it's one thing I think scientists need to do to improve trust, but also to counteract some of the things that go on with postmodernism and wokeness infesting itself in science, is to actually become better translators of what they do. Not on social media just per se, but to the public in general in multiple media platforms, be it print or cable TV or science or YouTube and video platforms and Rumble and what have you, or locals or any number of different things. They need to get better at that, but also in just the interpersonal, because so many scientists in an observation seem to live in a bubble where they live away from folks who are not scientists and get wrapped up and forget about the fact that they're just as human as anybody else. And so, like I said, I think probably one of the best things in the world for improving trust in a lot of these things and actually being able to sit down and talk on some of these issues again would be just to sit down and for a bunch of folks to have a beer and talk about it. Or at least in a virtual space, try and figure out something similar, which is what's been on my mind with locals for some time, is doing something like that. So I want to see something more like that, and it's not just about translating what you think is correct and things like that, or this is misinformation over here. No. If you really want to restore trust, you have to restore the empathy and the human nature of it. And again, I go back to postmodernism and wokeness in that they're both incredibly dehumanizing. Postmodernism and wokeness are very, very dehumanizing as I've been working on them, because they assume you are something based upon your immutable characteristics. No. You just need to sit down, have a beer, have a meal, chat, get into some conversation, talk about your work, try not to be contentious about it, all those kinds of things. Or if you get contentious, just gotta remember this is a person that's in front of you, right? They're not someone who's necessarily evil. It's a person. So you get to doing something more like that, I think. So let's see here, continuing. Science has been touted as the solver of all problems, and during crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, the public craves certainty. Yeah, I don't know that it's a good thing that science has been touted as the solver of all problems. That leads us to this scientism kind of thing, where science can solve everything, including the moral issues, which is not true either. Like I said, science doesn't provide you a moral compass. But science is dynamic, and when knowledge changes and technology is now enabling rapid changes, the public can become confused and even doubtful when shifts in understanding are framed the wrong way. This is all about narrative right here, is actually what that is. Whenever you see them framed when you're talking about conversation, I remember this from my communications courses actually in college, where you actually talk about how you frame an argument, how you talk about it, not the content as much as how you frame it. Scientists and educators must do a better job of explaining how science works to the public, as well as policymakers and leaders. That's one thing. I can agree with that. That's one thing, but as I said, that doesn't help with the trust argument side of things. Science continually challenges and improves the current state of knowledge. Yeah, that's part of what it does. That's organized skepticism right there. That's part of what science is supposed to do. This is how the world progresses. It is in the job of the scientific community to explain new findings in this context. Without this framing, the dynamic nature of science may be misunderstood as a weakness rather than a strength, and new findings may be misrepresented to the public. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed this vulnerability with dire consequences. One need only look at the hundreds of thousands of needless deaths resulting from vaccine misinformation. Okay, no citation. You got no citation on that, author. I want a citation. I want to see the data that proves that there's been hundreds of thousands of deaths from vaccine misinformation. I'm sorry. That statement right there is misinformation until you give me a study that I can critique and have a look at otherwise. That's misinformation. The other point, though, I actually kind of agree with in that, yeah, you got to explain your findings, but like one of the ways I think of how science is done, how science has progressed, is each generation of scientists stands on the shoulders of giants. all the greats that came before them in their respective fields. Um, from all over the world. So we stand on their shoulders. So it's like for everything that I do, and it's like I go back to Suki Manabe and Joseph Smagorinsky, who are the founders of climate modeling. They're the biggest ones in which things have been built, along with folks like my different mentors from all over the world who I've worked with in the past. And so there is that. Progress is built upon, over time, but sometimes there's also rapid progress and changes in particular emergency situations. And yeah, that can get confusing for people. I totally get that. But you overcome that mistrust not just by combating issues where there's wrong information that's put out. You overcome that by first off building a rapport to begin with from the start that is based upon the understanding that we're human beings, and you can look at the scientist who is talking to you as an equal, not someone who's trying to be their better, or anything along that line. So there's that particular aspect that you need to build that rapport ahead of time so that when you're having rapidly changing information, somebody can come to you and feel comfortable talking to you about it rather than having someone who seems somewhat condescending coming to you and saying, "Oh no, it's this now, it's this, not this," or doing the thing. I've heard some of the claims being made in the media and what have you as noble lies, engaging in noble lies because you think one thing instead of the other. So noble lies don't help gain trust either. To be honest, you might as well be honest, even if it's going to even if it doesn't help you immediately. Part of making the scientific process less mysterious and questionable for everyone is providing greater transparency. Yeah. Science advances through positive and negative results, and better ways are needed to report or share this information and present the full picture of studies. There also must be a means through which all fields of study commit to rigorously assessing the reproducibility of their findings. Yes, we do have a reproducibility problem right now. So yeah, I totally agree with that statement, actually. There is a reproducibility problem. These are efforts to bolster, not diminish, confidence in science, both within and outside the scientific community. Collaborative and open science efforts have spurred the rapid growth of open source platforms, data sharing, common methodology, and computational tools that enhance both scientific rigor and the generalizability of findings. Well-validated data are essential for the further development of new inventions and innovations. In parallel, the scientific enterprise still must provide opportunities for exploratory research, hypothesis-generating studies, and high-risk, high-reward endeavors, again affirming to the public that such pursuits can lead to deeper understanding as well as breakthrough discoveries. Yeah, what they're talking about there's been a healthy tension now for quite a while of the applied research versus the basic research, and I probably talked about this a little bit. You have basic research, which tends to be that high risk, high reward kind of thing, where you're getting into understanding and addressing sort of fundamentals of the different fields. Going and doing some serious fundamental research and what have you that is going to make breakthrough discoveries and change the way that science is done. But the other kind of aspect is more the applied research, which is sort of like research questions that relate to things going on in the real world, how should I put this? Looking at the frequency of flood events along the Mississippi River with the aim of preventing floods in the future or helping communities along the river be resilient. That would be an applied research kind of topic. So there's those kinds of things, and they have to go in parallel. And yeah, a lot of this has happened. I mean, in the last few years, there's more and more open source journals, which is really great because you can get in just as general public into an open source journal and see what's actually being said and critique it yourselves if you'd like. And there's all of those different kinds of things that are going on all at the same time. And yeah, transparency is going to be the key with this. But what do you do to make that transparency happen? You actually have to get scientists to be in here. Where was it? It was Texas Tech University, actually. They had a thing called Science by the Glass, and I thought it was really, really great because they'd have a discussion about science in some formal setting and what have you, and then they'd all go out for a beer together. And that's why it sticks in my head, the idea of, get everybody together, go out for a beer afterwards, or go out for a drink, or have dinner together, chat, do something that helps you all realize that, connect over on a level that you're not, the high and mighty scientist and what have you. As science progresses, society must be ever aware of the consequences. It can be challenging for advances that generate change to gain widespread acceptance. Sadly, there are examples of this throughout history in which scientific advances were implemented without careful thought about their long-term impacts on environment or society. This breeds distrust in science. For example, the failure to consider subgroups in population-level research has sometimes led to social and economic disparities in human health. Conversely, stratification of subgroups in clinical trials, such as Black patients with congestive heart failure, for example, has led to improved therapies that might otherwise have been missed. Building greater diversity in the scientific workforce may also lead to more equitable impact of new advances and improve the ability to communicate science with wider communities. So long as what you I mean, absolutely, yes, more diversity in science, but specifically diversity of thought in particular, making sure you have very diverse perspectives and diverse backgrounds from all over the dang place that you're bringing into science, so long as they, of course, are capable scientists at the same time. And so that's the point to make there, is that there should be very many diverse perspectives. That's critical to the pursuit of the truth, and that's also critical, I think, to the trust of science having to do with recognizing the humanity of every individual that is there, scientist or not. I'm reminded... I'm reminded because a colleague said something to me along the lines of, I don't know how to talk to this group. I'm a climate scientist, but I'm also a Christian. How do I go talk to these particular individuals? And this is again why I have a problem with the way DEI has been done. Why I have a problem with postmodernism and wokeness is that it is incredibly dehumanizing, because you get lumped into various identities rather than your whole and complete self, your identity, if you will. And that's where I think she has a problem. I actually don't have too much of an issue going to talk to more conservative groups about climate change, or talking with others in different groups. Actually, I've had some very productive conversations in that front in the last few years. But that's also because I don't approach myself as being, I don't approach my identity, myself as being made up of multiple identities. I am one whole person, but that is what you see is not. I don't show absolutely everything that I am when I'm in the professional arena of my field. I am certainly not rambling like this on YouTube. So there's things like that I don't show at a given moment, but that doesn't stop me from being a whole person and recognizing myself as a whole person rather than some lumped off identity. And that's one of the things. It's like, okay, what am I over here, and how do I interact? That kind of confusion that I get bothered by with the postmodern and woke kind of philosophies. Public perception of science depends on an appreciation that the scientific process is nuanced and cannot be reduced to overstated conclusions and, worse, premature implications for use by society. I'm going to point out, one of the premature implications for use by society was a couple of studies I did last week, the week before last on, masks with pantyhose was the week before last. What was the other one? Oh yeah, that the masks make you more attractive. Premature implications were in both of those. Just saying. Anyway, without this understanding, failures to predict outcomes or revisions of earlier findings may reinforce in some quarters a belief that science cannot be trusted. Let this be science's overriding message. As new discoveries inevitably alter our understanding, the methods of science push us ever closer to the truth. Indeed, they do. That is the purpose of science, to begin with, is the pursuit of the truth. But who defines what is misinformation? When you have those discoveries that you keep doing, and you keep altering, that do result in the altering of your understanding. The thing is, when you have competing theories about something and competing theories about those discoveries, you do find yourself in disagreement as in amongst scientists. That is entirely normal. That is entirely good. But what I do worry about is if scientists are being called upon to say what is misinformation, what is it to stop a scientist then from saying that this competing theory that they don't agree with from another scientist is misinformation, and therefore to work with a social media company to not allow them to present that to the public? Science is a very human endeavor, and I do very much hold with it that science, because it is a very human endeavor, should be as open and as accessible to the general public as possible. That is very difficult to do. It's part of the reasons I'm doing this channel, is to kind of try and point out some of those things that, scientific things, and break down some of the barriers to understand what goes on in science as a discipline and science as a method practice in finding the truth. So that has to happen more and more, and I'm hoping more scientists will get into this game and do YouTube or do Substack or do something like that to break down some of the barriers to help folks understand, hey, this is what really goes on in our world. Some of these kinds of things and these contentious debates and what have you are really what goes on in our world. But that being said, nobody should be censoring anybody just because you have a competing theory that somebody may think is incorrect and thusly get it labeled as misinformation. That's my thoughts on this whole topic. If you like the video, again, hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget there's a promo code down there that you can get 1 month free in my locals that expires on Saturday. So if you want to take advantage, you got to do it now, where we're going to be doing more things behind the scenes that are exclusively for my locals members. And with that in mind, I hope you come on over and join us at shiosofia.locals.com or follow me on Twitter. That's it for now, and until next time, I'm Adrian. I hope you all stay curious, my friends.